The warmth beneath her station. The alcove smelled like warm cotton and something close to bread. Steam pressing up through the pipes, thick and soft, filling every corner of the cramped little room. Dial worked the night shift the way he always did. Alone, quiet. Two pins held between his lips and one between his fingers. The sewing lamp throwing a warm cone across the scarred measuring table. He was 28 years old, lean the way tailors get lean, hours bent over fabric, shoulders curved in, gentle hands with needle prick scars dotting every fingertip. He was halfway through a torn sleeve when the door opened. She had to duck slightly to enter. Princess Ithavara stood in the doorway. Silver armor, clean chest plate, small shoulder guards catching the lamplight. Gray-green skin, platinum braids pulled tight beneath a metallic headband that served as her crown. Pale silver eyes moving across the room with the careful stillness of someone who had never been in a space this small. Behind her, a boy peered from under a blanket worn like a cape. Civil, 7 years old and vibrating with curiosity. The child's garment was torn, she said. I was told this is where repairs happen. Dell looked at the boy's blanket. Station issue, fraying at every edge. He nodded, held out his hand, and took it gently. No ceremony, no questions. He sat back down and began stitching. Civil climbed onto a fabric bolt and watched, transfixed. The princess stood rigid near the door. She had never been in a room this small with a human. She told herself she wouldn't stay long. The pins scattered across the table when Dale reached for thread. He picked them up one by one, slow and unhurried, and placed them back between his lips. She shouldn't have entered a room this small with someone this far beneath her rank, and yet she hadn't left. There's a story that starts with a sewing pin and ends somewhere neither of them expected. If that pulls at something in you, subscribe. There are more quiet moments like this one waiting. Civil's teeth were chattering before Dell even noticed. Without breaking the stitch, he reached behind him, pulled a thick bolt of thermal fabric from the nearest shelf, and draped it over the boy's shoulders. Civil gasped. It's warm. The princess stiffened. Her species didn't feel temperature. Thermal receptors dormant from birth, silent as unlit wire. She had never once in 200 years felt the difference between cold and warm. She watched Diel's hands return to the stitching like nothing had happened. A sewing pin slipped from the table's edge. She was standing close enough that it caught the sole of her bare foot. A sharp inhale, surprise, not pain. Dell was already kneeling before she processed the sound of his movement. His fingers closed around her ankle. Automatic, the way you move towards something fragile without deciding to. He worked the pin free. His thumb pressed briefly against the sole of her foot to check the skin. She felt it. Warmth, real and sudden and completely without category in her body's long memory. Her translucent fingertips flickered, a bright pulse racing from tip to wrist. Dal didn't notice. Sybil did. Your fingers are doing the light thing, Ithavara. She clenched her fists. The Civil held up the newly stitched blanket cape and inhaled with great seriousness. Can you make it smell like this room too? It smells like bread. Dell didn't look up. That's the steam pipe. Civil, genuinely disappointed. Oh, can you put bread in the pipe? His thumb on her sole had been an accident. The warmth that followed was not. And standing in that small room while a boy asked about bread in a pipe, the princess found she had no protocol for what her fingertips were doing. She came back the next night alone, said she'd torn her sash. It wasn't torn. Dell took it, turned it over in his hands and set it on the table with the quiet patience of a man who has learned not to say everything he notices. He pulled a needle and began the pretense of stitching. She stood close, closer than the space required, closer than protocol allowed. "Your hands," she said. "When you removed the pin, what was that sensation you produced?" He looked up. "At warmth?" She extended her hand, palm up, translucent fingertips catching the lamplight. "Show me." He placed his palm against hers. The bioluminescence didn't flicker this time. It cascaded, a wave of gold-white light moving from her fingertips to her wrist in one continuous rush, steady and unmistakable. She stared at it. He watched it move across her skin with the focused attention of someone encountering something beautiful and having no name for it yet. She yanked her hand back. The door slammed open. A royal guard filled the frame. His gaze swept the room. Dial, the untouched sash on the table, the princess's glowing fingertips. "Princess, you are in a lower deck alcove with a human, alone." The stillness that crossed her face was practiced and immediate. "I was retrieving a repaired garment." The guard looked at Dell, at the sash, at her hands which she had pressed flat against her sides. "Of course." He stepped back and waited. She walked out without looking at Diel again. The guard's eyes stayed on him a moment longer than necessary. Then the door closed. The alcove was exactly the same size it had always been. It had never felt this empty. Diel sat on his stool. On the table, a single sewing pin caught the lamplight. A tiny drop of bioluminescent residue dried on its tip, gold against the silver. He picked it up, held it a moment. Then he pressed it into the collar of the jacket he was making, right over the heart. Fowen went back to work. He pressed his palms together. They were warm. They were always warm. But tonight the warmth had nowhere to go, and it pooled in his hands like something spilling. The guard saw what she couldn't hide. Her fingertips don't lie. That story about warmth having nowhere to go, it's not finished yet. Subscribe. Part 2 continues tomorrow, and it goes somewhere neither of them saw coming. The warmth beneath her station, 4 nights. No knock. No sash that wasn't torn. So Civil came on the 5th. Blanket cape dragging behind him. Face carrying the particular weight of a child delivering news he doesn't fully understand. He climbed onto the fabric bolt without being invited and sat with his knees pulled to his chest. "She won't come back," he said. "She told me your deck is below her station." Dal kept his eyes on the needle. "But she keeps touching her own hand." Civil pressed his small palms together, slow and deliberate. I'm mimicking something he'd watched through a doorway. "Like this, over and over, and her fingers won't stop glowing at night. She thinks I'm asleep." He looked at Dell's hands. "She looks at hers the same way you look at a seam that won't lie flat." Dell set down the needle. The jacket was finished by the 3rd hour. Gray thermal fabric, no rank markings anywhere. Lined with the warmest material in the alcove, the kind of warmth you could feel through armor. He folded it carefully and held it out to Savelle. "For the cold," Dial said. Savelle looked at it. "I'm not cold anymore." A pause, the length of a child choosing honesty over tact. "Ithavara is." He took the jacket anyway. She stopped pretending the jacket was for warmth. It was for him. She just didn't know it yet when she put it on. That night, she found it outside her chamber door. No note, no rank, no explanation. She stood in the corridor for a long moment, silver eyes on the folded gray fabric, and then she lifted it and pulled it on over her armor. Her fingertips found the collar, pressed into it. A faint glow, steady, quiet, unhurried. She didn't know about the pin yet. She only knew the warmth moved through the jacket the way it had moved through his palm. The same temperature, the same quality, as if his hands had been woven into the lining itself. She walked the lower deck in a human tailor's jacket worn over royal armor. On one end, she did not take the back corridor. Dell looked up when the light in the doorway changed. She stood there, his jacket over her chest plate, the pin invisible in the collar above her heart, her silver eyes finding him across the small room. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the jacket's fit, the shoulder line, the way the hem caught at her hip. The automatic assessment of a man who made things and wanted them to be right. "It fits better than I thought," he said. She sat on the measuring table. He didn't ask why. She extended her hand the same way she had 3 nights ago. Palm up, slow, no performance in it. Just the question her biology had been asking since the first time his thumb pressed the sole of her foot. Diel set down his needle, placed his palm against hers. The light came steady this time. No cascade, no flicker. Just a long, even gold, warm and constant and completely without urgency, as if it had decided to stay. Neither of them spoke. Civil appeared in the doorway. He looked at their joined hands with the calm acceptance of a child who has already filed this under things that make sense, pulled his blanket cape tighter, and climbed onto a fabric bolt in the corner. Within minutes, his breathing had slowed, his head tilting sideways, watching their hands from under heavy eyelids until he wasn't watching anything at all. The sewing pin glowed faintly in the jacket's collar, right over her heart. She felt it then, the small, hard point of it against her skin. Barely anything, the weight of a whisper. Her free hand moved to the collar. Her fingertip found it, pressed it gently into the fabric. "My people have a word," she said, "for the first warmth you feel that you cannot unfeel." He looked at her. "What is it?" "Your name." The light from her fingertips didn't stop. It pooled between their palms, steady and gold, spilling softly onto the scarred surface of the measuring table. Nuncivil mumbled from the corner, half asleep, reciting the way children recite things they've memorized without understanding them yet. Ithavari thermal receptors stay dormant for life unless activated by sustained contact with a warm-blooded species. My tutor said it's irreversible. She looked at their joined hands. She knew. It wasn't a choice. Her biology had decided before her crown could object. And somewhere between a scattered pin and a jacket with no rank markings, so had she. So Dell didn't move, didn't speak, didn't pull away. He sat in the warm cone of the sewing lamp with a princess's glowing hand in his, a sleeping child on his fabric bolts, and a tiny pin shining in the collar above her heart. A work tool, insignificant and ordinary. Now the first point of warmth she had ever carried. That pin was just a tool. Now it's the first warmth she'll never lose. If you felt something in this story, subscribe. Tomorrow's story begins somewhere just as quiet and ends somewhere just as permanent.